If you're ready to unlock more better days, to take control of your health, to push past your limits and unleash your full potential, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Dr. Jeremy Bettle. For over 2 decades, I've worked with elite athletes and high performers, helping them optimize their bodies, strengthen their minds, and recover from setbacks. Now I'm bringing that expertise to you through the Vitality Collective podcast. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the science, strategies, and real-world solutions you can apply right away. Whether it's enhancing your physical performance, avoiding or recovering from injury, sharpening your mental edge, or simply feeling your best every single day. With insights from top experts and thought leaders, this podcast is designed to help you take action, feel better, and live the life that you deserve. Welcome to the Vitality Collective podcast, where every day is vital. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Mike Axler, a professor of exercise science, a PhD in kinesiology and applied physiology, and someone who has run close to 100 endurance events, including nearly 70 marathons and 20 ultramarathons. Mike is also the founder of Axler Concierge Coaching and the host of the Simple Science podcast, and he has spent a career doing what a lot of people in this space talk about but rarely actually do. He's taken complex research on exercise and nutrition and made it usable in real life. Michelle and I are deep into our own endurance journey right now, and so this conversation came at exactly the right time for us. We get into energy systems, what your body is actually doing during a rest interval, and how mitochondrial density connects cardio training to strength performance, and why Zone 2 is not just a tool for runners. It's a tool for anyone who wants their heart to still be working hard for them in their 70s and 80s. We also get into BDNF, brain health, injury prevention, and why cardiovascular fitness is the base that makes every other physical goal possible. This one is for lifters, runners, and anyone who's ever wondered whether they really need to do both. Welcome back to the show, everybody. Today, it is such a pleasure to welcome Mike Axler to the show. Mike's a PhD and a professor in exercise physiology. He's also a prolific endurance athlete. Mike, how many endurance events have you done now?
It's over 100.
Oh my goodness. Right. And as you all know, Michelle and I are just starting out on our endurance journey. So this is going to be such a great conversation for us to have with Mike. Mike, welcome and thanks for the time, mate.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
You said you started these events at like 18. You're running marathons and becoming a really like strong endurance athlete. And then you pursued that academically as well. So what was your area of study, your dissertation?
So what was honestly kind of funny was that our shared lab space, it was like 5 different labs at the University of Delaware. We were just broadly trying to understand different mechanistic insights of what's the link between poor diet, and we look at different vitamins and minerals, and onset of future cardiometabolic disease. And everyone took a little bit of a different angle, and the labs, like, too, it's like every lab has like a couple different projects, and ours was nutrition. So we looked at sodium, potassium intake and what that does on endothelial dysfunction, vascular stiffening, beat to beat blood pressure, autonomic nervous system functioning, things like that. But then for my dissertation, one of my huge passions is making ice cream and trying out different ice cream shops. Like I love it so much.
Yes, I love that.
I was chatting with my friend. He was like, "Hey, if you weren't a professor and coach, what would you do?" I was like, "Open up an ice cream shop." I love it so much. And so my study was called the milkshake study, and I wanted to understand between the sexes and across the lifespan, what is the difference in lipid metabolism? So what does that do to blood pressure? What does that do to arterial stiffening, vascular dysfunction in that 6 to 8 hour postprandial state? And the main awesome findings were that it doesn't matter if you're a young woman, old woman, pre-perimenopause, or a young man, older man. If you exercise and eat healthfully, you can still maintain really solid vascular function, which is great for decreasing blood pressure, decreasing cardiometabolic risk. If you just exercise and eat healthy, even if you have a milkshake.
Well, I feel like we need a bit of validation of that study. So I think we should probably repeat that. So if you want to send us milkshakes,
Sure, I'll send you my protocol. Yeah.
Yeah, we're big fans of ice cream. So yeah, but that's really fascinating because, when people think about a healthy diet, they're not thinking that it includes milkshakes. And I think that's where we get stuck in this optimization loop. It's all or nothing. If you have a milkshake, you've failed. You're not on your diet. You've just screwed everything up. So screw it. You might as well just let it spiral. But there's sort of an 85, 90% rule where most of your diet is really solid. And the other 15, maybe it's even 20% of your diet, really, that's for physique competitors preparing for competition. It genuinely isn't going to make any difference if you're at that 80 to 90% compliance rate across the scheme of your life.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting consideration. I can't agree more. And it's funny because I kind of gently rally against a lot of the folks who are obsessed with the little protocols here and there of like, how much sunlight do I need to get in my eyes? And how cold does the cold plunge have to be? All you need to do is just regularly exercise, regularly eat healthfully, and then regularly challenge yourself and sleep well.
Look, it's a bit of a sidebar just from a fascinating research concept that you've followed, but it does fit into what we want to talk about today, which is why cardiovascular training is beneficial for everybody. We have seen so much communication where cardiovascular training is bad for power athletes. Cardiovascular training is bad for intermittent sport athletes because it slows you down, makes you less powerful. No zone 2 for women, especially in perimenopause. It'll destroy everything you're doing. The underlying physiology just doesn't support any of that messaging. And Michelle and I, starting our journey into this endurance world, we have felt benefits in places that we weren't expecting to. We're lifters and we do circuit style lifting, right? And what we're finding is towards the tail end of those circuits, and we generally do 2-4 exercise complexes 3 times through, we're not feeling that drop off, and not necessarily in the weight we're lifting, but it's the energy. We were actually feeling like we get to the end of the workout, we're like, oh, okay, that wasn't actually so bad. So what's going on with the energy systems? Can you walk us through the energy systems and help the listener understand what cardio is relative to strength and power?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. And I think I'm going to end up asking you like a series of questions of like how you feel before and after. Because I came from that era as well when I was in college and I guess early grad school. All my friends would tell me like, hey, if you want to become a better, let's just say type 1 fiber endurance athlete, like slow twitch fiber athlete, like a marathon runner, ultra marathon runner, you should stop doing so many type 2 dominant muscle fiber, strength power, sports or lifting.
Right.
And then vice versa, you shouldn't have crossover. And what you noted is what a lot of other folks know too. And I definitely see that in like professional sports, and you worked in professional sports, is that a lot of these very, I guess you can call them like anaerobic, glycolytic, let's just say offensive or defensive linemen in the NFL, their aerobic conditioning is incredible. I mean, that might equal out to like a slow jog for 60 minutes or whatever it is, even though for, 3 to 5 seconds, push, stop. But you have to maintain that over the course of a game. And I think the way that like people need to look at it is all of that light cardio, whether it's like zone 2 or obviously you want to do like a mix of like some of the easy stuff, some of the hard stuff, all of that is going to build up like a reservoir or a bank, so to speak. You're going to build up mitochondrial density and mitochondrial efficiency. So instead of having, one okay engine in a muscle fiber, I mean, there's probably thousands or millions of mitochondria per muscle fiber, but instead of having one, you're going to have thousands or millions of these incredible mitochondria, which work more efficiently. You're also going to grow up more capillary, so increased capillary density for gas exchange. And you're also just going to like probably build up just a bigger ventilatory threshold and an aerobic engine as well, which helps you do other activities a lot better. So for someone who's like, oh, I used to get tired after 1 or 2 sets of squats, you can now do 3 or 4 because you're able to recover faster. And the whole movement just becomes more efficient. And a lot of people know too, when they start becoming a bit of a hybrid or concurrent athlete or concurrent training, is that they're not as tired between sets and between workouts because recovery is faster.
I think that's an important component you talked about is the recovery piece. That's where the aerobic system is effective, right? That is what you're doing in recovery. talk to me about like how we progress. So we start doing an activity that's high intensity, like a set of squats. How do we progress through the energy systems? What are they? How do we progress through them? And where do the anaerobic and aerobic come into play?
Sure. Yeah. So the way I like to think about it is if you can look at it in terms of squats, and then you can also look at it in terms of, let's just say we're running a race. I love to look at the idea of like, if you remember when you were a kid and you'd like run the mile in gym class and they'd say, okay, go on the whistle.
Yeah.
And if you were to watch that, you would see kids run as fast as they possibly could. And if you timed it, they would start walking at exactly 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And you say like, why is that 10 seconds? Because that first 0 to 9.9 seconds is the ATP-PC or the, you know, phospholytic energy system. So it's like basically you're just running off of intramuscular phosphates. So people who take like creatine monohydrate, for example, you can just have more for more phosphate functional groups in the first 10 seconds. And now if I tell you I'm going to give you $100 per every step and you keep going, you are still anaerobic. And maybe you can go for another minute or two and you're in an anaerobic environment, the glycolytic system, which again is like very, very difficult. You're kind of redlining zone 4, zone 5 if people look at heart rate. If I tell you, no, keep going, at a certain point, you'll start jogging. That's when you become aerobic. So you have a little bit of a shift from the type 2 fibers to the type 1 muscle fibers. And yeah, you're going slower, but that's highly efficient. You can go forever.
Right.
And if you take that in terms of squats and you say, hey, you know, I want to do like a 20 rep max of squats, which sounds horrible. Yeah. Again, in the first 10 seconds, you're using that ATP-PC system. Anything from like 30 seconds to a minute or two is going to be glycolytic, and anything after that's going to be aerobic. But one thing I love to see, and I'm sure you've had this with all of your clients and your teams you've worked with, is that the more you're able to push both aerobically and anaerobically, the faster you're able to recover. And that's almost like that idea of post-activation potentiation with like a top set. It's like if I ask you to pick up, 100 pounds and it feels really, really heavy, but then I ask you, wait 2 minutes, pick up 120, it's going to feel heavier. But when you come back to 100, it's going to be even easier because you primed your neuromuscular system to do something way harder. So it's like for a set of squats, if you're used to doing like repeat intervals, redlining it or doing like a long, slow jog, if I'm just asking you to do squats for 30 seconds to a minute, it becomes even easier.
Yeah. And that's, so there's a lot to unpack there that I think's incredibly valuable, how you described that. If we take that running example and we transition through the anaerobic and then into the aerobic, what that's going to look like for people, as you said, those kids, they're going to sprint off the line. So that first 10 seconds looks like sprinting. And it gets harder and you also start burning and then it becomes running, right? There's a difference between sprinting and running. And then that gets harder and harder and it becomes jogging because you can't maintain that same output, right? In that aerobic, zone. So I think that for people is that slowdown that you see is that energy system curve. So we've got anaerobic where there's no oxygen and it's basically going through your first few gears in the car where everything's like, whoa, hang on, your heart rate hasn't caught up yet. Your blood supply is not caught up. And it really allows you the time to get that aerobic system into gear for you to then get into that more sustainable piece. And I look at this like my set of squats that takes 30 seconds is an anaerobic activity. So I ramp right up into my set of squats, but then I put the bar down and I recover for a minute. Now I'm aerobic again. And the job of that aerobic system is to replenish the energy stores. Right. And so that's the interesting interplay that I don't think a lot of people value is what's happening during the rest time. And how do we augment what's happening there? Because we put so much focus on what's happening during the work set. Right? How much can I lift? Right? How many can I do? But then that drops off really quick if our recovery is ineffective.
And that's an interesting point too. And something that I think people don't really think about is I always ask like my students, I'm like, who takes creatine monohydrate in here? Or who has a high protein diet or high carb diet? Or who stays hydrated during workouts? I mean, we can go down like this robust
Mhm.
thought pattern here, but like what's happening, as you said, like during that, recovery period is, I always think about like, the energy that we take in the form of food comes in the form of calories or kilocalories. And inside the body, it's just adenosine triphosphate. So you have
Right.
like an adenosine backbone bonded to 3 phosphate functional groups. And this is all energy that you have. So when you're doing your 30 seconds of squats, it goes adenosine triphosphate, boom, you cleave off a phosphate functional group. Now you have diphosphate, boom, you cleave off a functional group. Now you're down to monophosphate, boom, that goes down. And you might have thousands or millions of these tiny little ATPs, but as you said, during the recovery period, that's when you regenerate from adenosine monophosphate to diphosphate to triphosphate. And even cooler too, people think in terms of like energy, how much energy do you have? We could also talk about the respiratory exchange ratio or the respiratory quotient of what are you
Yeah.
burning during these activities? And it's interesting too with like the aerobic system. When you're doing something aerobic and it's easier utilizing oxygen, you could be burning off primarily triglycerides or stored fat. And that is so great because all of us have thousands and thousands and thousands of calories of
Yeah.
fat on us. And that
Yeah.
could fuel us for probably weeks and months. If you want to stop eating today, it's probably fine. Just keep drinking and having vitamins. But during the anaerobic exercise, you're only burning off carbohydrates. So it's
Right.
very, very, very limited. And we know we only have 2,000 calories worth of intramuscular
Right.
and liver glycogen. So when that's tapped out, that's when you hit the wall. But if you're
Right.
really, really aerobically trained, you can use a mix of carbohydrates in the form of glycogen and fats in the form of triglycerides. You can just keep going forever. So, I mean, there's no shortage of people on the internet who are like ultra runners who will do these crazy 12-hour challenges on no calories. And it's like they did that because they kept their heart rate low. They were burning
Right.
off, fatty acids, and they can keep going. But with the squat workout, that has to end at some point because the limiting factor is either like systemic fatigue or,
Yeah. Right. Right.
glycogen that you have.
Yeah. Exactly right. And that ATP concept, from just so people understand, that it's essentially the energy currency in your cells, right? It's like having cash in your pocket, right? You're basically exchanging from your carbohydrates, from your fats. That's what actually becomes broken down and becomes your energy. So this is a great basis of exercise physiology for us to understand moving forward. The other term you mentioned there, mitochondria, right? The powerhouse of the cell. And this has really become a buzzword in longevity circles now. Everybody's got a supplement to help you improve your mitochondrial efficiency, improve the number of mitochondria. We've got autophagy. We need to start breaking down the dysfunctional mitochondria. The thing that people don't necessarily know about this is that exercise does all of that. Lifting weights, doing your cardio really does have a big impact on your mitochondria. Just walk us through at a high level the function of the mitochondria and how that happens during exercise.
Yeah. So it's interesting with that. How do you put yourself in the best position to live a long, healthy, happy life? Get out into the sun, run a mile or two, do some push-ups, and then like drink some milk. And that huge thing of just like getting vitamin D from the sun, vitamin D, calcium, phosphorus, um, protein from milk, strength training, aerobic training is like basically all you need. And if you look at, okay, what's the limiting factor? You almost have two different camps, I guess. And me coming from like the endurance, long, slow, ultra marathon background, I love, let's just say, zone 2 training because it
Hmm.
makes me feel good. You increase endocannabinoids, BDNF, like all your feel good hormones, so to speak. I probably feel
Hmm.
physiologically better than the next person. And then now there's all these high intensity folks who are doing maybe like CrossFit, High Rocks, or F45 or whatever. And I think those are phenomenal. They'll say, yeah, you can actually build up more mitochondrial density and efficiency by doing high intensity work. And you just need like a little bit of both. I look at someone between like maybe a grandparent who might be like 80 or 90, and then like a grandkid. The grandkid might be 5, they're running around, bouncing off the wall, they seemingly never get tired. And you see with the grandparent, when they want to stand up and head down the stairs, everyone's kind of grabbing their arm and whatever. And besides muscle and bone loss, so sarcopenia, osteoporosis, and general age catching up with them, if you think in terms of like mitochondrial health, and mitochondrial density. So how efficient are the mitochondria and how many mitochondria that we have. For the kid, they're just growing. So they're just building tons and tons and tons of these mitochondria, which are more efficient, and there's more of them. And as you get older, a lot of times with things like inflammation and oxidative stress, which are due to like different epigenetic factors like, age, smoking, stress, poor diet, inactivity, your mitochondria just kind of go away. But you can always ramp those up again too. So if you put someone who's sedentary on a really good strength training program, on an aerobic training program, they can just build up more mitochondria and healthier mitochondria, and you can fight off infection better. You become more energetic, and it's all you need. You probably don't really need to fast too much. Just be consistent and exercise and healthy.
So that's the important thing, isn't it? Because we talk about progressive overload a lot in strength training, right? So I would add strength training. Maybe it's in that high intensity bracket, but I would add a third group to argue with about like the strength training guys who are like, no, you just need to like lift weights, right? I think there's huge benefits there, but we recognize with progressive overload that you lift some weights, you damage the muscle, in doing so, you get the signal to come back stronger, right? You repair, you recover, the muscle gets stronger. And if you repeatedly do that over time, you get stronger muscles and you get bigger muscles and all the rest of it. But I love that notion coming from the aerobic side, as you're saying, whenever we stress a system, the same thing happens. So if we repeatedly stress and stretch that aerobic and anaerobic system, we create a demand for more energy and a demand for more mitochondria. So just by going a bit beyond your capacity and then recovering, you create the adaptation. And it would be, in my mind, the same thing. So the two, I think, it's natural that would create more healthier mitochondria.
Yeah, I like the idea of, I'm sure you're familiar with the SAID principle, the specific adaptations to impose demands.
Right.
And I think about it from the standpoint of like, if you want to have some really big moonshot goal, you're like, I'm going to run the Boston Marathon. And let's just say that like you are not the type of person who's running marathons or even fast marathons, but you're going to qualify for Boston. How do you do that? In order to raise the ceiling, you first have to raise the floor. So it's like, I'm no longer going to tolerate this level of training or this level of productivity. Let's increase the floor so we increase the ceiling, increase the floor, increase the ceiling. And when you have that, obviously there's a lot of considerations, and you and Michelle are doing that wonderfully now of like building up the soft tissue integrity of your tendons and your ligaments and all the fascia. You already have the bone density. Now you're also building up a lot of muscular endurance, so you can withstand all the training to get to your half, to get to your full, until we start running ultras together. And I'm going to keep plugging that in there.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of considerations with being safe with progressive overload. But if you're going to say, hey, we are running 10Ks now, that's what we are doing. You're pushing your body. Like you said, you and Michelle got like 7 miles to run today or 8 miles to run. It's like, yeah, that's something that you're not going to tolerate just running 4, just running 5. So you're going to push yourself to run that 6, run that 7, run that 8 at that specific heart rate, at that specific pace. If you're going to stress your muscles, stress your cardiovascular system, stress your respiratory system, stress your skeletal system, it will comply with what you're doing to it. And there's no shortage of studies of older individuals who are still able to make meaningful progress in the way of muscle protein synthesis, bone density, even cardiovascular fitness. I'm like, that's how that works. It's up to you to stress it though.
Well, and Mike, that's something I've seen coming out of professional sports, right? You think you work with these 18 to, at the top end, high 30s, maybe early 40s. We had some guys. And you think like, wow, those guys, they're making these little improvements every day. But we have seen in our clientele coming into Vitality Collective, people in their 80s who every single person who has come in has improved bone density, improved muscle strength, improved muscle mass, improved endurance. Stu Phillips posted a study the other day that there was a meta-analysis on every study in strength training that's ever been done. 0 participants failed to improve under any condition, right? If you started strength training, you improved. Period. So that's why this really is why should everybody do cardiovascular training? Your basic health and your baseline capacity, even down to the immune system, having the energy production capacity to fight infection when you're in your 90s. I think that this is such a critical component that is underrated once you start getting into that longevity conversation.
I love that. And I think that that's been, I don't know, there's a lot of time points in your life that it's kind of like you're in a new chapter and you kind of reminisce about the past. But that's hit me harder and harder, I think. Like my grandma would have been 100 today.
Wow.
And she died, I think, 4 years ago. And I
Right.
miss her every single day.
Yep.
And now my folks are 60-ish. And I mean, my mom's, of course, she's 19, 21, or 19, she's getting old, but they're 60. And I think about this from the standpoint of like, well, how do I keep them healthier? What can
Yep.
what can I say or what example can I set? And I think about that and I love the idea of like reducing inflammation and then increasing antioxidative capacity. And we know we can have things like tons of healthy fats, nuts and seeds, olive oil, fatty fish for decreasing inflammation. Wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Let's turn down all the static, all the noise inside your body. Let's get healthier. Antioxidant capacity, fruits and veggies all day. Go nuts. You're not going to have incredible insulin spikes by eating an apple. Enjoy. But I think about that from like the cardiovascular standpoint, even with respect to cardiac output. And if you do if you come with me on like this little tiny cardiovascular journey, if you look at the heart, and it's like what you and Michelle have been doing recently with all your 5Ks, 10Ks, your resting heart rate has probably dropped and your mile time has probably dropped with a consistent heart rate. And what that is physiologically is your left ventricle is becoming more efficient. So it's able to pump
Mm-hmm.
more blood per beat. That's an increase in stroke volume. If you look at the cardiac output equation, your cardiac output's 5 liters per minute. That's equal to heart rate times stroke volume. So your heart doesn't have to work as hard if your left ventricle can just forcefully
Right.
contract
Right.
however much blood it's going to pump out. That's incredible. So if you say, hey, I would love to live this meaningful, healthy life into my 80s, 90s, and beyond, or someone in the blue zones, 100, let me make my heart work not as hard for the next 40, 50 years. So like,
Mm-hmm.
that's one of my like goals that I kind of write down for myself on my whiteboard. I'm like, can I keep my resting heart rate under 50
Yeah.
for like as long as possible? Because I don't want my heart to work hard. But in order to have that, I need 1 or 2 hours a day of like really, really vigorous exercise. And then you look at infection, this is just like me spitting something out. And I don't know, there's probably studies on it, but like knock on wood, when I had the flu, when I had COVID, whenever I got sick, I was able to recover much faster than a lot of my friends who were sedentary. And I think there's something that can be said with a strong cardiovascular system, a strong immune system, and just being able to get blood flowing a lot more quickly because we know it's blood, which goes to the site of injury or infection, which is going to clean up the damage, the injury. So for me, I just want to feel good. I want to run fast miles, but I also just want to stay healthy. And I think everyone should want that. I don't want to be huffing and puffing going up the stairs.
And I think that's the thing, a lot of people you hear when they're sedentary, they say, well, if I'm going to die, I'll die, whatever. But that's not how it works, right? It's not like you're just perfectly healthy and you just die. You're going to be sick for 20 years, man. Right? That's the problem. You're going to be huffing and puffing, getting out your chair, getting in and out the car. You're going to not be able to get off the ground when you fall. You're going to take so long to get over illnesses. It's going to be a real battle because it's an energy intensive thing, fighting disease. Coming back from surgeries, people don't realize there's like a 50% increase in your metabolic rate when you're recovering from like an ACL surgery. So your
No,
calorie
really?
intake actually has to go up. Oh yeah. And because think about it, you're healing tissue, like lots of like deep layers of tissue. So you fall and you have a surgery, you've got to repair your rotator cuff. Like that's a lot of calories, right? That's a lot of energy. And if you don't have that efficiency, that is not a healthy life you're going to be living. Your last 20 years are going to get exponentially worse before that, well, if I die, I die happens. And nobody wants that. right? We're Vitality Collective and not Longevity Collective, because I don't care if you live to 100, but if you're sick from the time you're 70, like, man, that sucks. I want you healthy till you're 100, doing the things you love. And this, for me, underpins the capacity for how you are able to do that in your 90s. So where do people start? Right? We're on that journey, right? And it's fascinating. You mentioned the heart rate thing. Mine's probably dropped in the last 6 months about 10 beats per minute.
That's probably significant.
It's been really significant.
Yeah.
Really significant, because, in going through our entrepreneurial journey, and you go through seasons of life when your training goes up and down and your health and fitness changes. And we'd gone through a period of sporadic training, and you'd seen that drift of all your metrics upwards. So your heart rate's higher than it's been previously. And it's been fascinating to watch it really quite consistently come down over the last 6 months, which has been fabulous. So where do you like to get people started on this journey?
It's like the joke about like how many therapists does it take to get it to change a light bulb, and it's like one, but they want to have to change, right? It's like,
yeah.
And that's, I think personally, I've been very lucky in a sense that for me, exercise is like a huge therapy thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very deep and meaningful to me, and other people not as much. And I know you work with tons and tons of people, from, professional high level athletes to the general population. So I could take that back at you as well. But it's funny with me, it's like, if I think about all the folks that I'm coaching right now and I have coached in the past, they have a very strong why as to why they want to do something. And like, let's just take, for example, like one of my friends' dads who I coached for the past like 4 or 5 months. And he was down, we got him down about 22 pounds in the first 3 months. But even more so than that, like, he basically has no more muscle mass and cartilage in both knees. And since he dropped 22 pounds, he feels better.
Right.
His triglycerides are down, his LDL cholesterol is down, his body weight's down. He just feels more confident. He had to buy like new jeans, and he loved buying new jeans because he's down 22 pounds. He just feels great.
Right.
And I'm like, I consistently ask him, like, why are you doing this with me? Why are you allowing me to help you understand what nutrient density is and what healthy exercise is? And he's like, well, I feel like my kids are going to get married at some point. I want to be there to see it.
Yeah.
And then I have other clients too who just want to qualify for Boston. I'm like, okay, cool. Your why is qualify for Boston, whether you're 20 years old or whether you're 73 years old. I have a 73-year-old client qualified for his umpteenth time. So
wow.
I think it's just understanding like where people are and getting them to see that. And for my folks specifically, like my brother and sister-in-law are having a baby soon, and they're like, holy cow, like we want to be healthy for that. So it can't be me saying, hey, here's the research on this, here's the research on this. I want to be there with you, and maybe I can offer some suggestions, but like, I can't be the one to make you run those 7 miles. I can't be the one to force you to stop drinking Coca-Cola and start having, air fried veggies. I can't force you that. But like, what I can tell you is what you basically said, is that most people are going to die of cardiovascular disease. And it's not boom, all in one. It's like a steady, crappy decline. And nobody wants that. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's how I think day to day.
Yeah, no, but it's the foundation of every program, isn't it? Right? Because we've got to find that in order to be able to maintain it. Like, if we know it's hot as hell here in Florida and we've got a 7-mile run to do today, if we don't understand why we're doing that, we're probably not going to do it. Right? Like that at the end of the day, it's got to be meaningful. And then on a practical side, once we've established that, where do we then start practically on, if I'm going from zero, what's enough? How much should I be running? Should I be running? Right? What are the modalities that we can use to do this? Is it important to run? Can I do something else? Is it a lot? Is it slow? Is it fast? There's so many variables and so many mixed messages. As you said, you got all the camps yelling at you about, do this or you're a waste of time. Yeah,
I like the idea, and I'm sure you can also kind of vibe with this as well, that like, it's almost like with a diet, the best diet is the one that you're going to stick with.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I feel too. It's like, I had a bum Achilles for the past like year and a half. It's been really annoying. And right now, thankfully, it's feeling pretty good. But I was doing the stair stepper, and some of my running friends like, oh man, why are you doing that? And you're not running. And it's like, I have a bike here in my house, but it is such a drag to use for whatever reason. It's like, I want to claw my eyes out. It's just so boring, and it's constant push. It's not a lot of pull. So it's a lot of concentric, not a lot of eccentric. So my quads are going to blow up. But the stair stepper is fun because I get to people watch at the gym, and then there's like a TV right in front of me. So it's like low barrier for entry. It's high reward, low barrier for entry. So for some folks, it's like, hey, if you know that you love or hate commercial gyms, make that work for you. You love the ski erg, or you love biking but hate running or hate stair stepping. Okay, do one of those things. But if you can start at like some baseline of maybe, I don't know, 2 days per week or 3 days per week for even just, I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes. It doesn't have to be until you're sweating profusely. Just do something. And at that point, I feel like people start to get an idea of like what feels good for them, what doesn't feel good for them. I'm like, okay, so do that. My dad, like, he loves hitting the circuit of exercise equipment at Planet Fitness. I would love him to start squatting for axial loading because he's getting like a little bit of that curvature in the cervical spine, but he's not going to listen to me. But I'm like, hey, if you're doing the circuit, good enough for me, and we'll work on squatting when I come home back for Thanksgiving. But I think that's like a good starting point, is meeting them where they're at, and just kind of building from there.
I think that intensity piece is important. I think I have a background running it. I played rugby at a high level, and so was quite cardiovascularly fit, maintained cardiovascular fitness, but more into strength and power because I had some knee injuries. And so running became like really challenging. And in coming back, I think the key mistake that I made was trying to go too fast. And it just sucked. It was so hard and demoralizing because you're like, well, I used to be able to do this. Like, what the hell? And so it wasn't until I backed off a little bit and actually ran at my conversational pace, which is a bit of a blow to the ego, that I was actually able to speed up, right? Because I started enjoying it and would actually go out and do it more often. And so a key mistake was not accepting that slower pace, not accepting where I was. The other thing, and we would do this a lot in rehab, to help people understand, a lot of people will go through, say, an ACL rehab, and they're not allowed to do any strength training because of whatever protocol they're in. And then at 6 months, the physician will say, okay, you're cleared to run. And what I always explain is that running is 1,000 single leg plyometrics. And so the intensity of each stride, if you look at the biomechanics of it, 3 to 6 times body weight going through each step. Well, that's a lot of force to be putting through your calf and Achilles. So that, again, another thing that I intuitively understood, but didn't necessarily execute on my own advice well, was making sure that my kinetic chain, my soft tissue was actually prepared to do that increase in volume. So are your calves and Achilles strong enough to withstand that quick stretch shorten? You know, you mentioned having a bum Achilles. Those things persist if you don't get strong enough, right? And so this is where, like on the other side, endurance athletes getting into the weight room is important. So things that stabilize up through your ankle, your foot, ankle, knee, and hip are critical for you actually being able to stay healthy and be consistent enough to maintain a running program. So I think those are the other considerations from my side, like what I've experienced coming back into this world.
Do you think that we're heading in the right direction, though? That more endurance athletes are getting into the weight room, and then more strength and power athletes are also doing a little bit more cardio, some more concurrent training?
I think we're at the front end of it. Because I think some of that has sort of been debunked, right? When you see some of these top CrossFit competitors, and these guys are not struggling to put on mass. These guys and women are absolutely yoked, right? They're just like stacked with muscles, but their cardiovascular fitness is out of this world. Like I'm absolutely stunned by these athletes, and with High Rocks coming in now, you're seeing a lot more of this hybrid training. And so the crowd that are like, well, you shouldn't do cardio or you shouldn't do circuits or aerobic training because you can't build muscle. Look at the outcomes, right? We've got lots of examples now, thousands, millions of people doing these events who are disproving this on both ends, I think. And I love seeing like a lot of my feed now on Instagram is becoming running. And there's a lot of people like who are promoting different, like here's a warm up, here's a strength training program for runners. So yeah, I think we're definitely heading in the right direction. And I want to encourage this from a performance standpoint, but then also just from a long-term health standpoint. Because if we can stay injury free and we can keep performing these things that we love doing, then we can do it consistently for a long period of time, which is ultimately how we're going to stave off chronic disease and this decline we've talked about.
I wonder if I was speaking with someone recently who it's like a sports scientist with an NFL team, and his like big claim to fame of like what he was really proud of, because I asked him like, what are you really proud of for the past few years? What do you want to like tell people about? What makes you really excited? And he goes, yeah, like we had the fewest number of injuries over the past 3 seasons when I was the sports scientist.
Yeah.
And I asked him how he did that. And he was like, well, we did the right tests, we looked at the right data, and we applied it correctly, because like he's like on contract with the NFL. He can't tell me like exact little pinpoints, but I was like, I love that point that he said and what you ended with there, where you're like, you know what, like maybe we can make these athletes not only more fit, but more healthy and less injury prone. And I was watching Philadelphia Eagles like I do every single Sunday during football season, and my girlfriend goes, you know, why are the guys on the offensive and defensive line so heavy, so overweight? And I'm like, well, it's kind of the nature of the sport. I think the average,
go to that job.
yeah, it's the average is 370 pounds. Like
Yeah.
I just hit 170 because I want to bulk, and man, I feel heavy. Like they're 200 more pounds. Like, like how is that possible?
Yeah.
And I was like, I mean, unless they all agreed to like drop 50 pounds or 70 pounds or whatever it is. But I'm like, if you look at them over the course of the game, like Jordan Mailata is 6'9", 385 pounds. I mean, the man is just go, seemingly doesn't get tired. I'm like, his cardiovascular fitness is amazing. But like the Eagles offensive line, like they're constantly going down with injuries because they're like a rhino or a hippo. They're so top heavy. And you look at like a little bit of like knee valgus and it just boom, now you go down. Or someone steps on their calf and boom, there goes your Achilles. I'm like, how do we make these high level athletes less injury prone? It's like, it might just be the nature of the sport. Maybe they're getting a little bit too big, a little bit too strong, but I don't know. You're the perfect person to ask because I've never worked in sports science.
Yeah. I mean, this is sort of what my career became was bulletproofing athletes, right? We went 3.5 years in the NHL without having a single injury. And the first thing we had to do was suspend belief that it couldn't be done, right? If you just think that, oh, it must just be the nature of the sport, it must just be the size of the athletes, it must be this. Like hockey got faster and faster and faster and faster, right? Sprinting on ice, basically you take the quad and the hamstring and you just turn the thigh sideways and it becomes your glute and your adductor, right? Because everything's lateral. And so now we've got sprinters in this lateral side-to-side motion. And so groin injuries are going up. So that just never sat with me. Like we shouldn't accept this. Same at the Nets. We went last 2 years without having a soft tissue injury. UCSB, we got 250 female athletes. We didn't have a single ACL tear. All of this basically comes down to what are the risk factors, right? If we know knee valgus and that forward shift in the knee is a risk factor for ACL, well, how do we test for that? How do we see who's at risk? And how do we intervene and correct it? How do we monitor it? And if we train people out of their risk factors, and we keep them there throughout the season, injuries go away. We had our last soft tissue injury 6 months into my first year in Toronto. Byron phrase, I remember it because I was pissed. Right? That was the last one we had. And that was 6 months into the program. If you're very deliberate about it and you monitor all of these factors, there's no reason to have all these injuries. And it's the number one factor in decline in the general population. Right? When you get injured and you have to go for surgery, if it's a rotator cuff, if it's a hip fracture from osteoporosis fall, these are the things that when you're laid up for 3 months, it's not just that injured site that drops in capacity. It's every single functional capacity you have because you stop moving. So you lose lean tissue, you lose bone mass, you lose cardiovascular fitness. And the first time it happens, you get a drop that's the equivalent of a year of loss, but you might not feel it yet. You're not breathing going up the stairs yet. But it puts you on a whole new trajectory. If there's a 2% loss every year in this stuff, you don't want that stepwise decrease to a whole new trajectory. Because what it does as well is it creates this injury re-injury loop. So you've dropped off, every capacity has decreased. Now you're more susceptible to injury. So now you keep declining because you're less active, because you didn't rehab properly, and then you get hurt again and you get another stepwise decrease. And we had pro athletes drop out of the league because of that. We actually made basically a part of our program was going and finding these guys and bringing them back up the spiral so we get a $6 million a year player for the minimum, right? Because we just get them back in the league and they love it. So the intervention is the important piece. You test and you monitor, but what do you do about it? Right? It's the therapy and it's the strength and conditioning. And that's what keeps you going. There's no IV, right? It's not like you get an NAD infusion or you go on the red light bed or you get a vitamin IV. Like you got to get strong. And that's what the model we're applying now into the general population for longevity. It's that if we can avoid you having those big precipitous drops in all of these functions, then we can keep you going. And then it's an age-related decline, which is really minimal. That age-related decline shouldn't look like what the general population actually looks like these days. That's a lifestyle-related decline that we're currently seeing. The point you made about the heart being strong, like that's such an important point. Doing your cardio is how we make sure that your heart stays really strong, just as we do your squats to make the rest of your body strong. I saw a lecture earlier talking about doing Zone 2 training, conversational level training. And they're saying your job is to make the heart stronger. Your heart rate comes up as your intensity goes up. And with that, the force of contraction goes up. But the force of contraction stops increasing at about 60% in that Zone 2 range. And then it just gets faster. He's like, so why don't we do more Zone 2, where you're getting as strong a contraction as you're ever going to get, and just do loads of reps, essentially. Great for your heart. So I thought that was a great explanation.
I'll have to check that out. I like that way of reasoning things because you can't really, I guess, persuade someone to do more Zone 2 cardio if they're not on board with it. And I know way too many folks my age who are like, oh, like cardio. And I'm like, hey, I've also seen a lot of people at 30 years old really not look so good and not feel so good. Maybe you should give it a go. And like, from like the hormonal side too, as I brought up earlier with the idea of like the acute, and the chronic increases in hormones that you get between the endocannabinoids and like right after a workout, the endorphins, and then just like the significant rise in BDNF that you feel like. I'm pretty confident that I'm happier and more at peace day to day when I'm training than when I'm not training.
So BDNF, explain that for the listeners.
Yeah, so BDNF, it stands for brain-derived neurotropic factor, and it circulates throughout your body, and it responds very strongly, I know, to aerobic exercise and probably to strength training as well. And you can look up a number of studies detailing that any form of cardiovascular work, it's not just Zone 2, it's not just high intensity
Right.
interval work, but that can significantly get raised chronically. So not just right after workout, but for like days and weeks when you're consistently doing aerobic training. So it's like after
Yeah.
workout, you're like, oh, I feel great. Those are mainly endocannabinoids and endorphins, and that tails off after a couple hours. But BDNF, that stays risen for a while. So even if you have to take off a day, you're probably still going to feel a little bit more at peace than if you didn't work out for a week or two.
And what should really make you feel at peace is what BDNF is also doing for the physical structure of your brain. Like, this is one of the talks I give when I'm doing public speaking, is about the benefits of exercise for brain health. BDNF, it proliferates neurons, redundancy of neurons in your brain. So you create new brain cells. It protects the ones that you've got, helps to replenish the energy systems of your brain. Right. So there are physical improvements to your brain that happen because you are doing this type of exercise. And we can get into like the energy demand. Like, your brain has to coordinate this movement. That's energy intensive on the brain. So we're actually stressing energy systems in the brain, up-regulating mitochondria in the brain, up-regulating all of these neural pathways in every area of the brain. So the cross-connectivity. So just from a don't get dementia standpoint, going for a run is a really good thing to do.
One of my, I guess, more recent obsessions, have you ever spoken with Dr. Tommy Wood?
No, I haven't.
Definitely reach out with him. He just came out with a book about how to like decrease dementia risk. He's at University of Washington, really funny guy and brilliant. I think MD, PhD. And one thing we were talking about and he wrote about in his book was this idea of like decreasing neuroinflammation. And I think a lot of people, rightfully so, are a little bit nervous about getting neurodegenerative diseases. So anything like dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, obviously ALS is like you roll the bad dice and there's not a lot you can do about it. But any neurodegeneration, there's different things that correlate with that. And they kind of look differently in the brain, whether it's like a decrease in the gray matter or a demyelination of the neurons. But as you had said, the idea that the more training you do and the harder it is, also like the more paved and myelinated your neurons can be.
Right.
So if you see someone with Parkinson's and movements are very choppy, that's like some disconnection between the afferent and the efferent communication of your brain talking to your hand and your hand talking to your brain, because it's almost like having potholes on a roadway. Everything's choppy and discontinuous. But the more exercise you do, you reduce neuroinflammation and you just build up more myelination on those neurons. So you just become healthy for a longer period of time. And same thing too with like, doing a skill that just seems bizarre to you. So maybe like juggling with your eyes closed, it might seem impossible, or brushing your teeth with your opposite hand. That's another great one too. I've started to do that. I started skateboarding again. I haven't skateboarded since I was 15. Feels really funky at 30, but I'm like building up my nervous system and hopefully it pans out well.
What the main researchers in flow states, and they're starting to think about longevity as well. And Steve Kotler's one of the guys at the forefront. He talks about extreme sports being longevity sports. Things like skateboarding and snowboarding and skiing and these things where you've got to move your body, but in reaction to something that's coming at you. It's why tennis is such a good longevity activity, right? Part of not fracturing your hip is not falling. Part of that is being able to catch and decelerate and change direction, right? If you trip and fall, well, that's tennis, right? But you're doing it in response to a movable stimulus. So all of these things, the cardiovascular training and the weight training, underpin your ability to do these activities that ultimately become longevity activities. You can play tennis if you're strong enough and fit enough to play tennis without getting hurt, right? The cardiovascular training builds the base for you to keep playing tennis, which builds the base for you to not fall over and fracture your hip and succumb to the subsequent illness from that within 6 months.
Absolutely.
These are such powerful and important conversations to project out beyond what's it going to do for me this week. Am I going to have a six-pack for the summer? Right. I think that's the real crux of what we want people to understand here.
Yeah, I love that idea that you brought up with tennis. And what is tennis? I forget what the term is called, like an open skill versus a closed skill.
Yeah,
and like,
exactly.
God, like the idea of like using your proprioceptive senses and your kinesthetic senses, your awareness of like, where am I in space? Am I balanced? Am I reacting to something? Is the wind blowing in my face? Is some dog barking over there, but I have to get the ball and then we're up by 2 points, got to hit it back. And it's like, that is so important. And I heard a study yesterday of, maybe you had heard of it too, that there was these nuns who donated their bodies to science. And they had all lived into old age. I don't know if they were 70s, 80s, 90s. But a lot of these nuns, when they dissected their brains, they presented with early onset Alzheimer's and dementia. But when they spoke with all of like the other nuns who knew them, they're like, no, like their cognition was great. They remembered things. They were still having great conversations. And it was this idea that like the physiology wasn't necessarily matching up with like the cognitive abilities and the psychology.
Yeah.
Because they were constantly getting out into the community, constantly learning new names, constantly having different projects, different conversations, learning new text, reading. So yeah, the fatty tissue of the brain will start to degenerate over time. But as long as you're continually challenging yourself, you can just build up more neurons. You can have that neural plasticity, and you can like not really present too much with like dementia if like you just keep it firing.
Yeah, and that's the redundancy that we talked about. Right. If you build more cross-network communication in your brain, if you build more neurons within the brain, you have more redundancy. So you can withstand trauma and impact to the brain from these conditions without necessarily losing function, which I think is really a fascinating byproduct of exercise. We could go on for the rest of the week on this.
Yeah,
this
I feel like we can do that. There's like 10 other things I like want to say, but I'm like, I'll let you lead this thing. But
me too. I'm like, we should probably wrap and we'll do another episode. So mate, what would be 3 things that you want the audience to take away from this conversation that they can build into their life right away?
I think that if you can I could give you a certain amount of money, or I could give you a gift. And like, that's fine. That's temporary, but I can't give you the gift of health, longevity, and vitality, but I can give you like the advice. And I think if everyone, for the most part, can do something physically challenging today, and that could just be a little bit more than yesterday. So if you're walking 4,000 steps, but you want to walk 4,050, awesome. Do that. If you can run a 6-minute mile, go for a 5:59-minute mile. So just do something a little bit harder than yesterday. Even if you Google or you ask ChatGPT, give me a random fact or teach me how to say the word apple in French, do that so you can just learn something very strange so you can keep challenging your mind. And then if every time you sit down to eat, you have a protein in front of you, so anything from like meat, fish, poultry, nuts, and seeds, as well as a fruit or vegetable, every single time you sit down, you can still have your crap, whatever you want to eat. But as long as you have a fruit and veggie in front of you and a protein source, I think for the most part, you'll be okay.
I couldn't agree more with those. I mean, where can people find you to follow along with what you're doing and continue learning from you?
So I have a podcast called Simple Science, and I had you on, a couple weeks ago, and you and so many other incredible guests that I just have the good fortune of speaking with, who know a lot more than me. So I think that's probably the best way. And from there, you'll see all my other links. I have a coaching company, and I coach a lot of marathoners and things like that. But yeah, Jeremy, thank you for having me today. This was so much fun.
Yeah, this was great, mate. And I just want to say how much I enjoy being on your podcast and how much we enjoy the show. It really is phenomenal resource for people. So keep going on that and keep putting out the great content.
And you as well. I subscribe to your show, so I can't wait for all the drops that you do with all these great people.
Amazing. Well, thanks for that. And thank you again for the time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap with Dr. Mike Axler. There's 3 things that I want you to walk away with today. First of all, do something physically challenging today that's a little bit harder than you did yesterday. It doesn't need to be a big jump. 50 extra steps. 1 second off your mile time. 1 more rep. The direction matters more than the distance. Second, challenge your brain with something genuinely unfamiliar every single day. Learn a random fact. Try a new physical skill. Pick up something that feels awkward and do it anyway. Neuroplasticity requires novelty. Your brain does not build new connections by doing the same things that it already knows how to do. Third, Anchor every meal to a protein source and a fruit or vegetable. Not instead of everything else you eat, in addition to it. You do not need a perfect diet. You need a consistent baseline. If you want to keep learning from Mike, find him on the Simple Science podcast. If this episode resonated with you, the best way to support the show is to follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts and leave a rating or a review. It makes a real difference in helping us reach more people who could benefit from these conversations. You can stay connected with us on Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Vitality Collective Performance, where we share additional insights, behind-the-scenes content, and updates on upcoming episodes. The information shared in this episode is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Always consult a qualified healthcare professional before making any changes to your training, recovery, or health practices. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time.